Hey there, friends. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're actually getting a whole new setup to go ahead and record live on Sunday mornings, and we had some issues this past Sunday. So unfortunately, we didn't capture the video from Sunday's message, but we did capture the audio. So I just want to let you know that from here on out, it's going to be just the audio, but I hope you enjoy, and I hope God speaks to you through this word. Today, we're starting a brand new series. I think it might be one of my favorite ones, and I don't know if you're allowed to say that when you just start. It's like, you haven't even gotten into it. I love this topic. I'm excited beyond words for the topic we're in, but it's kind of funny because we're talking about rest, and we're going to be talking a lot about the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is the fourth commandment in the Ten Commandments. Yeah? Y'all? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Have you ever thought about how funny it is that God had to command it? No, but really, let's just think about that. That God had to go ahead and say, hey, you need to rest. In theory, I think if we're all here today, we're all here kind of it should probably be a little bit odd that that's kind of funny. Because if anything, you'd think that out of the Ten Commandments, God might need to be get off your lazy butt and do something, right? Get up and do something, make something of your life, be productive, work, do things. And then we'll get into this later in the series. It's definitely even more ironic when you think of the context by which the Ten Commandments are given to the Israelite people who have just gotten out of a short stint of 400 years of slavery. And then it's hey guys, I'm going to command you. You need to take a break. Anyway, we'll get into that later on. But it's kind of funny. It almost reminds me of kids. If you ever seen a kid fighting a nap, they're I don't need to nap. You're yes, you do. Anybody ever seen that kid? That kid that's fighting the nap, and you're oh man, where are the smelling salts? Just whatever. But I would never do that, just for the record, okay? I wouldn't actually do it. I just joke about it in a sermon. But we're about to do a 7-week series on Sabbath and rest and comfort. And I'm absolutely convinced, ironically, doing a series on comfort, just so you're forewarned, that this might be one of the more uncomfortable series for a lot of us. Yeah, it might be one that really kind of just rubs us in an interesting way. It's a little bit uncomfortable for us, and so I'm warning you that so that you're prepared. But it's because we kind of fight rest. We kind of fight this really good thing that God offers us in rest. And so I love that Scripture tells us that it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And so my goal today and for the weeks ahead is to go ahead and look at the commands that God gives us and see the kindness of them rather than try to use them as a way of guilting us into doing something, okay? That's really important to me because what God says about the Sabbath needs to be obeyed, but I'd rather go into it with a sense of let's enjoy the kindness of God in it. But I want us to really understand how serious this is, okay? Yes? So here's the deal. I was telling Madeline about this because actually I'm really excited. God gave her a word a couple weeks ago, I guess, or months ago. I always get it wrong. Anyway, a couple months ago, and it's just such a fitting word for this series, a real prophetic word. So I told her next week, and she's but Jonathan, at the beginning, I'm we're not even getting into Sabbath today. We're starting a series on rest, and we're not really going to get into it today. That's how much you need work on this, because you're not even ready to get into it, nor am I. I'm not trying to pick on you. You're wow, I came to church to get encouraged today, didn't I? But here's the deal. I think we need to get just how serious the Sabbath is, because here's the deal. If I told you guys that I made an idol this week, or something like that, yeah, you wouldn't laugh actually. You'd probably be concerned, Or if I told you I worshipped a different God, or I stole something. Or I had an affair. Or I killed somebody. By the way, if you're not familiar with these are also in that list of 10. If I told you any of those things, you'd be But if I told you it's been a really busy season, and so for the last couple of weeks, months, I can't remember the last time I had a Sabbath, most people in this situation, if somebody's telling them all those other things, they're oh my gosh. And then if they tell them, I haven't really honored the Sabbath in weeks or months, they'll be yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have a day off? I mean, yeah, no, I get it. Who cares? Really, or maybe even Sabbath, who? Sabbath what? What is this Sabbath you speak of? I am unfamiliar. It'd be an unfamiliar thing. But let's be honest, okay? We're just getting right into this series today, yes? Okay. Most people would carry it with a different weight than all the other 10. Significantly different weight, yes? And I kind of get that, but I'm just saying it's one of the 10, and we kind of just throw it out, and we're oh, it's not really that important, maybe, kind of thing like that. I'm convinced that this Sabbath thing is super critical, and it's a big deal, and too few of us see it that way, and too few of us honestly really understand what it means, how we do it, what God wants it to look like. And so we're going to get into all those details in the series. We're going to really go, okay, what does God's word say about what it looks like to Sabbath, what it looks like to enjoy it, what he has in mind for it. And so it's going to be a really like teaching series in that way, but it's also going to be a preaching series. And today I'd like to preach a little bit more than teach, if that's okay. So we're going to go into a passage, like I said, that has nothing to do with Sabbath to start our series on Sabbath. So if you have your Bibles, 1 Samuel is where we're going to turn. I'm going to tell you a story. And it's a story about a guy named Saul. And Saul's not known for being one of Israel's best kings, but he was one of Israel's kings. He was actually the first one. And so I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. And let's just check out the story here. Saul was 30 years old. By the way, a great age to be. Like, if you turn 30, you probably are at your peak. And also, my wife turned 30 yesterday, and so Saul was 30, and he ruined his life at that point. So don't do that, Madeline. All right, the story continues. Saul's 30, and he became king, and he reigned for 42 years. Saul selected 3,000 special troops from the army of Israel. So how many troops does he have? This is going to be an engaging Sunday morning, just to forewarn you. If you're new to Alive, welcome to Alive. So glad you're here. We set up the seats in this way so that I can look at you and you can hear me and I can hear you, and we're going to be engaged. So how many troops does he have? 3,000. 3,000, yeah. And he sent the rest of the men home because they're not ready. He took 2,000 of the chosen men with him to Michmash and the hill country of Bethel. The other 1,000 went with his Saul's son Jonathan to Gibeah in the land of Benjamin. Soon after this, Jonathan attacked and defeated the garrison of Philistines at Geba. The news spread quickly among the Philistines that he's starting to attack them, that like the war is starting, like they're ramping things up. So Saul blew the ram's horn throughout the land, saying, "Hebrews, hear this, rise up and revolt." All Israel heard the news that Saul had destroyed the Philistine garrison at Geba, and that the Philistines now hated the Israelites more than ever. So the entire Israelite army was summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. Now the Philistines mustered a mighty army of 3,000 chariots. That's 3,000 chariots, okay? Those are just the wheeled chariots thing, okay? So like, big deal, you got 3,000 chariots. Well, 6,000 charioteers. That's, by my math, 2 charioteers for every 1 chariot. So homeboy riding, shotgun gets to go ahead and come and fill in when the other guy gets killed. You got a backup. You're ready to go. That's pretty, okay, that's bad. But if that's not bad enough, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. They camped at Michmash, east of Beth Haven. The men of Israel saw what a tight spot they were in, and because they were hard-pressed by the enemy, they tried to hide in caves and thickets and rocks and holes and cisterns. Some of them even crossed the Jordan River and escaped into the land of Gad and Gilead. So let's really get into this before we go any further. Saul's responsible for 2,000 troops personally, and then another 1,000 troops through his son Jonathan. By the way, what a great name. So he's got 1,000 and then personally responsible for 2,000. That brings us to a total of 3,000. Just making sure you're with me. 3,000. 3,000 troops he's responsible for. But so he's responsible for their lives, right? Like their lives are in his hands. But that's not the thing. He's king of Israel. And so therefore it's not 3,000 troops that he's responsible for that are relying on him. It's hundreds of thousands of people who call Israel their nation. And he's responsible for their well-being. If they lose this battle, it affects their lives. It's not just the 3,000, like the rest of them are going to be affected by it. That's weighty stuff, right? Can you imagine hundreds of thousands of people being relying on you? I mean, some of you, maybe that is your life and your job, but like, I personally am glad that that's not where I'm at right now in my life. I'm not quite to that point. And it's especially weighty once you realize that, again, he's got 3,000 troops, and he's up against 3,000 chariots, which, by the way, are in war. I'm not a big, war buff, but I'm pretty sure chariots beat foot soldiers in like the kind of comparison of equal to chariots and with charioteers in them so they have 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and then they have foot soldiers, so many, the scripture tells us, that it'd be like, I don't know, remember when your feet were in the beach this summer at some point and you were kind of looking at the sand just kind of washing over them? That's about how many soldiers the other army has, just like that many soldiers. So that's what they're up against. So the odds are not even, right? And Saul's army is catching wind, as we just read, of this scary scenario, and a number of them are going, I'm just going to go to the bathroom over there, and they never come back.
And they just keep on going off into the hills and the thickets and the rocks and the cisterns, and they're trying anywhere they can to hide, and they're getting out of there. So the story continues. Meanwhile, Saul stayed at Gilgal, and his men were trembling with fear. Saul waited there 7 days for Samuel. Real quickly, 3 chapters earlier, we're going to get into this, but 3 chapters earlier, Samuel said, hey, here's the deal. You've got to wait for me 7 days before you ever go into battle. I'm going to do a sacrifice. It's part of our ritual for preparing and getting God's favor on the army going in. So you just wait 7 days. So Saul had waited then how many days? He'd waited 7 days for Samuel, as Samuel had instructed him earlier in chapter 10. But Samuel still didn't come. So Saul realized that his troops were rapidly slipping away. So he demanded, bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Saul sacrificed the burnt offering himself. Now, in the way that only God works things out, just as Saul was finishing with the burnt offering, you can still smell that piece of meat burning up and all kind of stuff. Samuel then arrives. And Saul went out to meet and welcome him. But Samuel said, Don't even try to pound it. Don't even we're not bro hugging. No. What is this that you've done? He doesn't even go for the greeting. Samuel's like, what are you doing? Saul replied, and here's the interesting. What's he say? Come on, everybody. He saw. That'll come back. So just remember that he saw something. He saw his men scattering from him, and you didn't arrive when you said you would. And the Philistines are at Michmash ready for battle. So I said, the Philistines are ready to march against us at Gilgal, and I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. I haven't even asked for the Lord's help. I knew it wouldn't be right for me not to do that. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself before you came. Now, if you're familiar with this story, which some of the people in the room maybe, and some of you maybe you never heard the story before, but here's the thing. If you do know the story, Saul just messed up big time, and Samuel is in the process of letting him know, you messed up big time. You messed up really big. But I think to truly appreciate this moment and what is happening, it's good that we notice something that Saul could have done that he didn't do. And that would be for Saul to look and go, okay, listen, Prophet Samuel is taking his time. So grab your swords, grab your shields, grab, I don't know, a stone. Let's go. We're going to go out there and we're going to fight these guys because he's got a dwindling army, right? He's got less and less people to fight with. So it's okay, just forget that sacrifice thing. It's not we'll worry. Hopefully God will be with us. He could have done that, and he didn't. So he's looking at this going, we need to make the sacrifice. We need to go ahead and do that. He didn't ignore the spiritual sacrifice. He knew that sacrifices were important, but he was seeing things that were happening that he couldn't ignore. He was under an incredible amount of pressure, and so he's going just waiting in this moment would be insanity. It's like suicide. If I just wait for this prophet to come, it's the 7th day, and he said, wait 7 days, and it's day 7, so our time in the 7th day is slipping. It's insanity to let my army drift and dwindle away. We couldn't just sit and do nothing. We make our spiritual sacrifices, and then let's go, is what he's thinking. So he didn't ignore the spiritual stuff. He just did it disobediently and in his own strength and in his own wisdom rather than what had been commanded. So check this out, guys. His aim was kind of noble, but his method was fearful. So his aim was noble. His desires were good. He wasn't who cares about sacrifices? Let's just go fight him. He's no, this is really important. But he did what he did out of fear. Yeah. So that's the problem. It's really bad if I don't do this, he thought. And it's really bad if you don't do this, Saul. But also, here we go. It's really bad if you do. 1 Samuel 13 goes on. How foolish, Samuel exclaimed. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. Had you kept it, the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. How nice does that sound? But now your kingdom must end, for the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. The Lord has already appointed him to be the leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. You've not kept the command. And had you kept it, God would have blessed you, prospered you, made your kingdom great. Doesn't that sound nice, by the way? Samuel's just rubbing it in. Had you just done what God commanded, oh my gosh, it would have been so good. Imagine God blessing you and establishing you and everything that he's called you to do. He's going to go ahead and fulfill it and help make it happen. Sign me up. I'll take that. But what ended up killing that, what ended up destroying that possibility, you didn't keep the command that God gave you. So you're going to suffer for it. So how did we get from Saul making a sacrifice to God to finding out that he just sacrificed his future? How did we get there? It was because of how Saul was seeing things, right? Remember how I asked us to kind of make sure we caught that? Like he said, I saw. Saul saw. I didn't, but Saul saw some things, and it kind of caused him to go a certain direction. He seemed to be thinking, and this is how we're getting ready for Sabbath. Saul saw the things, and he said, I'll follow what God says when I see what God sees. I'll follow what God says when I see what God sees. But currently, I see a dwindling army of mine, a growing army of theirs, an army that's way bigger and also has way better machinery to go ahead and wage war. And I see that we need to fight. I see that we need to do this. And this just has to happen. Don't you see? It's obvious. Like, this is, again, Saul thinking. Can you put yourself in the shoes of Saul for a moment and just imagine? Like, Saul's going, like, it's obvious. They need decisive leadership right now. It's obvious. They need to be active instead of just sitting and waiting. Y'all, 7 days. You can only sharpen your sword so much in 7 days before you're done. It's sharpened. You're literally cooking up meals, camping out in the middle of the woods or in the middle of the fields or wherever they were at in that Gilgal area, and you're just sitting and waiting. 7 days. Again, can you imagine 7 days? I really want to know 7 days of sitting and doing nothing. Are you with me? Yeah. That would be uncomfortable for a leader to sit in. If you're the leader, if you're Saul, you're going, this is just nuts. This makes no sense. It's obvious they need to be assembled and start attacking before there's no army left to attack with. So this is what Saul sees. It's obvious. It's duh. And I think it's not too unlike what many of us see when we look at our circumstances. When we look at the day that God told us to remember, to honor, and to observe. See, 3 chapters earlier, Samuel had told Saul and given him this command, a command to hang tight and wait for him before going into battle so they could do the sacrifice. Now let's talk about, real quickly, the command we were all given through that list that God gave Moses for his people. It says in Exodus 20, in that famous verse, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. So it's fairly clear. Kind of like Samuel's command to Saul. Just wait for me to come, at least 7 days. After 7 days, free to do whatever you want to do. But you're going to wait at least 7 days for me to come, and then we'll do that. So we're told, hey, in this command, do your work, do your laboring for 6 days. You get 6 days a week to do that. But then you need to take a day and keep it holy, and on that day, you don't do as you've been doing. Every 7 days, a full stop to where we stop working and stop producing. So now Saul was riding that line that people like to ride, and we like to ride it with this command as well, the Sabbath. So Saul's kind of like, okay, it said wait 7 days, right? Wait 7 days? Well, so we're in the 7th day now. Like, we're in the 7th day. So I think now we're kind of like, he said wait 7 days. We're in the 7th day. So can I just go ahead and break the command now? Because I'm not really breaking it when you think of it, because it's actually do you see what I'm saying? So we do this with the Sabbath, because what happens is people are like, go ahead and take a day to rest. And first of all, people are kind of like, that's just straight crazy. And then secondly, after we get past that, we're like, okay, well, but can I do this? Or can I do that? Suddenly we're terrified at the prospect of being told that we have to take a day every week to just stop working. Like, we're terrified by it. And so it's kind of bewildering, really. Like, God's like, hey, just take a day every week. Every week you get a day to just rest and enjoy me and enjoy my creation. And right off the bat, like I said, some of us are just like, that's crazy. That's every week? You want me to I'm not sure I could get my work to ease up so I could get a day every week to get off. And then some of us, like I said, are going to go ahead and say, okay, so you're saying I shouldn't show up to the office or to log in hours on this Sabbath thing or whatever it is. Okay, sure. But then we immediately start bargaining with the whole deal. And we're like, all right, okay, so no going to the office, no putting in hours like that. But is it okay if I run errands and clean up the house and build that play set for the kids and catch up on laundry and things like that I really need to get done? Notice I didn't say, God, run the report, email the client, place the order, or draw up our strategy for next month. I didn't say any of that. I'm going to just do this Sabbath thing. And God's like, do you even get this? Do you even get how this is supposed to work? Because I think the problem for many Christians is we don't. Like, we just don't get the Sabbath. And that's why I'm so excited about this series, is because I think a lot of us haven't really been taught well about it. And so I'm really hoping that, like, by God's grace, we're going to really dig in, because this subject of Sabbath is foreign to our world. Can we just acknowledge that? Like, this is going to be straight crazy. Some of you are already going to be like, yeah, this is nuts. We're not going to come back for this. But here's the reality. If we don't get it, we suffer for it. And so my intentions in this series are to really delve into what the Sabbath was and is and honestly will be, which is a whole other thing we'll get into later in the series, to get really, really practical on the Sabbath like we're commanded to do. But I don't want a church of Sauls who I believe are meaning well, doing wrong, and suffering for it. But today I want to attack this thing at the heart level before we get into the details at all. So we're going to go at the heart level with this because of all the teaching of the Sabbath and the meaning of Sabbath and the ways we can and should Sabbath mean nothing if we don't deal with this one question. So my one thing, usually if you come to a live long enough, you'll know that there's usually one thing that I'm like, hey, if you get nothing else, get this. And usually it's a statement. But today it's honestly just a question for you to consider as you look at your life, for you to really reflect on. I simply want to ask us this morning to think about this question. Does the Sabbath need to make sense in order to make it into your schedule? Because here's what I'm going to get to. We're going to get into what it looks like to Sabbath, what exactly does God want us to do and not do, what day of the week it should be or has to be or doesn't have to be, things like that. We're going to get into all that. But if at the end of the day it has to make sense to you in order to make it into your schedule, that's kind of a non-start from the beginning. And Saul kind of had that thing. See, that's why I found a lot of people don't Sabbath. It's not because they got confused in reading the commandment, the fourth commandment, and were like, I'm sorry, what does don't mean, though? I don't know what don't means. Like, they know what don't means, so don't labor. Like, but does don't mean don't? Yes, don't means don't. And not because they're usually convinced that, well, I'm convinced it's an Old Testament thing. Some people, that's maybe their thing, but usually it's not even that. It's not like they have a hard time counting to 7, so they're like, I missed it again this week because I couldn't count that high. Or not because they believe it's something that isn't good for people. Like morally, they're just like, I really feel like it's morally wrong. These aren't the reasons that people give for not Sabbathing, like ever. It's just that for them personally, it just doesn't make sense. I'm going to be hitting real close to home for some of you today. I'm kind of not sorry at all about it, you know. I'm sorry, maybe I wish I could, but that's just not really reasonable and realistic given my circumstances, right? Circumstances. Let's, how many of us, real quickly, can we engage a little bit here? All right, because we're going to go ahead and have a little pity party for ourselves. We're going to get real at church today. We're going to go ahead and have this thing. How many of us have a demanding job? My hand is raised way high. Okay, yeah, some of us have a demanding job. Okay. How many of us have at least some concern about having enough money to do all that we want to do in life? Okay, yeah. How many of us have kids or somebody else that depends on us to provide for them? Okay, yeah. How many of us have, here we go, ready for this one? How many of us have chores that we're behind on around the house? I didn't think there would be, okay, I'm not the only one, okay. How many of us, not chores, how many of us have like straight up projects, a number of projects around the house that you are unfinished and really need to get done? Yeah, it should get done. You're going to fix it one day. Yeah, you're going to fix it. And here's the last one. How many of us have a backlog of emails that we need to respond to, but we haven't yet? Okay. Circumstances. At some point, your hand was probably raised there. Circumstance. It's tough to imagine honoring the Sabbath by keeping it holy, by working 6 days, and then completely resting and not working on a seventh day when you have all of that stuff we just talked about going on. I mean, come on, you've got to be kidding me. Circumstances. Let's talk about Paul's circumstances here, okay? Saul's circumstances. We'll see if this one works. Okay. We'll do Saul. Can you guys see this, by the way? Yeah. Some of you can, some of you can't. Just imagine it says Saul, because it says Saul. Okay, so his circumstances as he went, we're going to do some graphs today. Day 1 was here, and then 2, and then 3. Count it up.
4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, 8. It stops at 7. That's. Pay attention to the story. It stops at day 7. Okay, so at either point, what point do you think Saul was concerned about whether they would win or not?
1.
All of them, right? Yeah, like all of them. Like 1, maybe even before 1. Like he's concerned about whether they're going to win or not, because in his own flesh it looks scary already and all kind of stuff. But here's the reality. Day 7's the day that he has to wait until. Do you think let me see here. Do you think that if he were to look at this, like it's pretty nerve-wracking, right? Let's look at this. What day would it have been wrong for him to have sacrificed, of these 7, sacrificed himself? He's not prophet or priest. He's king. All of them. So it's wrong on all of them. So it's wrong either way. But as we're tracking this on a scaling kind of thing, how hard was it to not do that? How much frustration do you think? Where did it go as far as like down or up? Yeah, it goes up as he goes along. As the week goes on, the obedience to the command that didn't change got harder and harder and harder and harder. Right? Yes. Just this is real high level stuff, but hopefully, you're all tracking with me. Like the obedience was always the same, but like it got harder to do as he went along. All right. Now let's look at your yeah, I do need that page. Thanks, Steph. I'm just gonna all right. So your life. There we go. Okay. Your life. This will be how well life is going. And so we'll say right here, life is going like awesome. So yeah, star. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, life is awesome in that corner. I mean, pretty great. Like, if you got kids, the kids are actually well behaved, or they just sleep all the time, or they're like awesome, like really fun little like human beings, or something like that. If you've got a job, your job's actually rewarding. Like, you like the people you work with. Can you imagine? And like the job itself is rewarding and things like that. Like financially, you're doing all right, and things are going kind of well for you. Now, again, nobody's life is perfect. Let's be honest, okay? But on this side, like life isn't actually that bad. The relationships you have are going pretty well. Like things are pretty good. Over here, not so much. Like money is tight or non-existent. Relationships are a stress, and they just are not going the way you wanted them to. Your job is just driving you up a wall, and you're on Indeed more than you're actually doing work. You're kind of like just everything it feels like is going wrong in your life. Okay, now for these different people, for this kind of like, and this is a spectrum right here. Okay, right? A spectrum. Obeying the Sabbath, is it for some or all of these people? It wasn't like a qualifier, was there? And like the honor the Sabbath, unless your life really is a mess. Okay, so it's all. Okay. Now, let's just be real. Where is the Sabbath easier to come by? If life is going pretty well, is it harder or easier than the other side? Which direction do you think it goes in? Star is the easier one, right? And it just gets harder and harder. Because if your money isn't going well, sitting on a Sabbath day and not working doesn't feel as productive, right? If like things aren't going well, you feel like you got to keep on putting more into it to go ahead and get it to be what it needs to be. Yes? Yes? Are you all on the same page right now? Yes. Okay, now here's the fun thing. If you're counseling someone else, because we're so good at like being able to see someone else's junk and be able to counsel them the way that's healthy and right, way more than we are ourselves. If you're counseling somebody else and you're saying, hey, Sabbath is always good, but you were to perhaps just say, I think this would be even more valuable, more helpful. God would really be doing something profound in your life by you just taking a day and really knowing what it looks like to rest in the comfort of God, in His provision over you, in His goodness to take care of all of your things. If you were to have a rest, a day maybe where you worship with other believers and you set that aside to really make it important to go ahead and just put everything aside and worship God in all of His goodness. If you were to say on which side of this maybe that person would need it even more, would it not go like this? The idea I'm trying to draw is that the harder life gets, wouldn't it be the more that you would say you really need a Sabbath? I guess that's what I was trying to do. The more we need the Sabbath, the less likely we are to take it. That's the sad part about it. The more that we need this thing that God has given us, the less likely we are to go ahead and to take it. Because as long as our lives are a mess, we're thinking, I can't afford to do this. And our human understanding, listening to the Lord and spending time with Him, seems maybe like a waste of time when we have so many other important things to do. And so we feel like we can't afford it when we most need it. because remember, you got all those issues. Life's a bit crazy and all that. And I think it's worthwhile for us to see that inverse relationship, because for some of us, the question that I'm going to ask again, does the Sabbath need to make sense in order to make it into your schedule? For some of us in the room, we haven't been Sabbathing because we feel like we can't afford to, but that's when you most need to. Like, it's always good. It's always for every one of us. But like, that's the problem, is we've got the sense of like, I'll do it when I can afford to do it. And that's not how obedience to God works. We're invited by God to do what he says, but just in the moment, not just in the moments when we have the vibe of what he's doing, like we're on the same page. When we operate like that, we probably don't Sabbath. And if we do Sabbath and we're kind of trying to like get around it a little bit, we'll chop it up. And we'll do crazy things of like, well, I do it, but I do this, that, and the other. We mess it all up. We have more of a Frankenstein than we do a Sabbath. Like, it really is a mess. And here's the real kicker. I tried to point this out when we looked at Saul's story. Saul didn't just say, forget the whole animal sacrifice thing to God, and get his favor. We don't need that spiritual mumbo jumbo. He actually did what seemed like a spiritually conscious decision to do the sacrifice himself, right? So that's what he explained to Samuel. He said, hey, I just knew we needed to do this, so I did it myself. So get this. It was Saul's spiritual excuses which led him to disobedience, which led him to spiritual destruction. Ooh. So some of us are in real danger because we can go ahead and spiritualize our disobedience to the Sabbath. Because we can say things that are probably true, like, you know what? I have to be a good worker. I have to be a good steward of the gifts that God has given me. Right? Some of us might look and go, listen, I have to take care of the people that God has given me to take care of. I've got a wife and kids, or I want a wife and kids, or I've got myself, and I'm the only one taking care of myself. Like, I wish I had somebody who would help with the rent, but I don't. So this is all it is. And I need to be a good steward. I don't want to get into debt. And we can go ahead and spiritualize it all the way through. Okay. You can do this in ministry really well. Because in ministry, there's flipping eternity on the line. So how are you going to, I understand I'm maybe one of the only ones in the room that's like, vocation is ministry. But if you get involved in ministry in any capacity, let me tell you, you can either build widgets or you can lead people to eternal salvation in Jesus Christ. And I'm not trying to minimize making widgets. I'm just saying that once you have that sense of oh my gosh, how dare you take a day off? How dare you rest? But you know how you do it? Because you recognize at the end of the day, you ain't saving anybody anyway. I don't save anybody. Anybody we baptize at Alive Church, it's not because I went ahead and saved them. It's because, you know what? Jesus saved them. And maybe he let me be a part of it, which is really cool that I get to be a part of it. And as a church, we get to be a part of what God's doing and changing people's lives eternally. But I will drive myself into the ground if I own the responsibility to go ahead and do it all. I guess you could say, be God. And some of you are driving yourself into the ground because you are trying to play God in your life. And it's killing you. Because if you break the Sabbath long enough, it will break you. And I'm not trying to be, I know, it sounds like I'm trying to be really encouraging. I'm trying to love you well. I'm trying to say that for some of us, it's felt tiring and exhausting because we've wanted to, even like Saul, look at it and go, listen, I've got to do this. This is in some ways right and righteous. But you know what? I was talking with a pastor this past Tuesday. I know that Luke mentioned it last week, but every month, just so you guys know, Alive Church hosts here in our building now. We've moved it here. A monthly gathering of pastors from different churches in the area. And I just want to tell you, if you give to and through Alive Church, you bought donuts for those pastors this week and paid for their coffee. So you know how you sometimes like to go out to eat sometimes with somebody and be like, no, I got this. Isn't it fun to do that? You guys got to do that for pastors this past Tuesday. And every month we do that for pastors because we love to just be in community with other churches in this city. We're not in competition. We're in community and unity. Yeah? Anyhow, I love it personally because I always get stuff from them. So I was talking with one of the pastors about this series, and he said, you know what? I once heard it said, and it was kind of cheesy, but I thought it was good, that busy could stand for buried under Satan's yoke. It's a little bit of an acronym. It's kind of cheesy, but there you go. And I think it's fair, and I think it's fitting. It's that idea. It's a little cheesy, but we feel sometimes in life, don't we, a pile up on us? just the weight of everything that we're responsible for. We have no choice. We have to do it. All of it. And the voice that said to Saul, hey man, it's got to be done, is looking and whispering to each of us and going, hey man, hey girl, you got to get this stuff done. Have you seen all that you have to do? Have you seen your to-do list? You think a whole day, maybe not a whole day, maybe you just take part of a day and call it like a sort of Sabbath. You call it Sab. I don't know. Like you kind of just like, or you figure out a way to like maybe like do a little bit of work on it, justify it this way and that way. It's like Satan's out here saying, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you stress. Right? That's what he's saying, because that's his yoke. But fortunately, Jesus says something different. Matthew 11:28, he says, come to me, all who labor, which is all of us who work, right? And are heavy laden, which means the work is kind of not always easy. It's a little bit heavy. You kind of feel the weight of it, yeah? Feel the weight of the work, feel the weight of that deadline, feel the weight of all the stress of the, not even like work, but like the pressures of life. And Jesus says, come to me. And I will give you, not stress, he says, I will give you rest. I will take that over stress, by the way, please. And then he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So that's getting even deep now. For my yoke, my what? Yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yoke is both a farming metaphor, like it's a farming thing. Like they would have two cows and they put a yoke on them, and it's to keep the cows in line and all kind of stuff. But it was also used by rabbis, like normally when Jesus used this. It was normally used by rabbis to talk about their way of interpreting the Old Testament law and teaching, and basically a rule of life. Like their way as a rabbi of being a teacher to go, here's a, like modern day, it's kind of like a life coach. Only with like the God part, you know? Like the idea is like, here's my yoke, here's my teaching for what you would do. And so it's kind of like, yoke is kind of like grind. Like, you know, like you grind your coffee in the morning, literally, and then figuratively, some of us, we just go on the grind and grind ourselves into the dust by the end of the day. So it's kind of like yoke can be literal, but it's also figurative, okay? So just so we're clear at what just happened is, Jesus is like, all y'all who are hardworking and feeling the weight of work that never ends and can often feel unproductive, come to me and I'll give you a series of teachings on how to live. Here we are, weary and heavy laden, and what does Jesus offer us? A 6-day paid cruise, all-inclusive, a full body massage, a bottomless Starbucks gift card, an uninterrupted nap? No, a yoke, which doesn't sound a whole lot like a terribly restful thing. Does it, at first glance? But for Jesus, he realizes that the most restful gift he can give the weary and the tired is a totally new way of looking at and doing life and carrying life that will actually transform the way that they tackle their responsibilities. Yeah. He's going, you don't need the nap, you don't need the Starbucks, you don't need the more vacation days as much as you need a totally new way of living life. Yeah. Like I just need to take it and like just rewrite the whole script. And one that will be a life that will be fruitful rather than frenzied. And he starts this by inviting us to come to him. That's the first ingredient of this recipe of rest, which is great, isn't it? Not to do more or even less. He doesn't talk about what we do at all in this one. He just says, hey, come to me. Come to Jesus. Because let me tell you, there's no real rest apart from Jesus. There's no mantra that you can repeat long enough, or some special retreats, center you can go to, or a meditative state that you can get into that can replace the rest that comes from relationship with Jesus. There's just nothing that beats it. And it makes sense for us to come to the Lord when it comes to handling the Sabbath too, doesn't it? Because before coming to Jesus, it's very easy to see our situation as just too much. Like I'm overwhelmed, and it's just a daunting and insurmountable amount of things that are on my plate to do. But then in coming to Jesus, we see him as bigger and greater and sufficient and stronger. Look at what the psalmist says in Psalm 62. Find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I won't be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. The God who created the entire world in 6 days, invites you and I to join him in the seventh day and just rest with him. Right? That sounds good. Like, it sounds so good that he invites you to take his yoke and to learn from him then. So it's not just come to me, but he then goes on in that verse and says, here, take my yoke and learn from me. And I'm going to combine them today, because as we enter in this series, I want us to humbly admit something here, that we all have things to learn from Jesus about Sabbath. Okay? Can we just kind of all go into the series that way? We all, even I have done like multiple series on this and I study this a lot. Like, this is one of my favorite subjects to kind of get into. Not saying I'm doing it, in fact, that's what I'm saying. Like, I get into it because I'm like, I need to learn more. I need to grow more in this. So if that's the case, then what if we all just came to learn from Jesus? Because here's the thing, Jesus had probably a lot on his plate to take care of. And it'll take some humility for us, because in our stubbornness, we may say, well, this stuff just isn't realistic. Like, this Sabbath stuff, like, come on, can we just be, that's the biggest problem I'm trying to tackle today, is just the problem of, we're going to look and go, this isn't realistic for my situation. Some of us, that'll be the worst thing, is that we'll go through this whole series and be like, and that's why I called today's message, wouldn't that be nice? Because it's the idea, like, oh yeah, like it's Samuel or Saul looking at the situation. It would be nice if I could wait, but I can't wait. I've got to do the sacrifice. It would be nice if I could Sabbath. I mean, Jonathan, I hope everyone else is getting this, because this is good stuff, but yeah, my situation just doesn't allow it. And here's the funny thing. Jesus was one of the most rested people in the world. He Sabbathed, was rested, knew what perfect rest was. And here's the great thing. He pretty much had 3 years to go ahead and to do his ministry of seeking and saving the lost, offering himself as a bodily sacrifice for all of humanity's sins, and then also training up 12 very rough guys to go ahead and be the sole messengers, really, to go out and carry on his life's work after he dies. So that's what he was doing for 3 years. So yeah, what are you and I doing that is so big that we can't do rest? Like, Jesus was the one who did it. So let's humbly come to learn from Jesus. What was the way that he lived? How does God mean for us to view the Sabbath and do the Sabbath? God, how do we honor it? What's the purpose of it? Where did it come from? And this one, again, like, might surprise you. Where's it going? Where's Sabbath going in the story of humanity? There's so much for us to learn about rest and comfort that God brings in Sabbath. I just cannot wait for the rest of this series. But honestly, I really believe this could be one of those series that changes some of our lives in like it's a life-changing one. Like, we're never the same after this one. God brings a new level of maturity and freedom and just a better sense of what he wants for our lives, the freedom that he wants for our lives from this. But here's the thing. Jesus said, let's finish this up. He said, come to me, take and learn from me. And then the last verb was like, find rest. Find. So we're going to find rest. Deep rest. Like, not like that Sunday afternoon nap kind of one. Like, especially on a day like today. But like, that times 100. Like, because the rest that he's talking about, and this is how I'm going to define rest in this series, a healthy realization of how great and powerful God is to sustain his people, that it convinces your heart to release your worries and frees your spirit to experience rather than just do life. Right? Some of us have been so busy. I had somebody yesterday I was hanging out with. I asked them how their life was, and they said the one word we always say, busy. That's good, but it's really busy. Some of us have been so busy that we've somehow along the line, we found ourselves with full schedules and empty souls. And Jesus says, I want to give your soul rest and recharge. Jesus promised life to the fullest, not the busiest, the fullest. And that's what he wants for you. He invites you into that. And some of us, we feel like, no, I just got to keep doing. I got to keep going. I got to keep busy. I got to keep producing. There's big things that go on. And I really love the way this 18th century poet put it. William Cowper, he says, a life all turbulence and noise may seem, to him that leads it, wise and to be praised. But wisdom is a pearl with most success sought in still waters. That idea of like, we can sometimes think, man, I gotta hustle, I gotta grind, I gotta go, I gotta keep after it. And some of us have seen the wisdom of this world, and are following its rhythms of that nonstop thing. We're busy, like terribly busy, exhaustingly busy. We hardly have a day off, and when we do, we probably don't even, we probably are working on chores or projects, or we have no energy to do anything, we just veg. And that's not even rest. Like, we're literally just dead. And we're just kind of like recharging, maybe watching Netflix all day, or just napping, or just kind of like, I don't even know what my day was, I just didn't do anything. We're like a computer that has too many tabs open, you just shut it down, it's not even working. Like, it's just not even working anymore. So during the week, you and I, we got a lot of things to carry. Like, I get it. We got to carry our jobs, and we got to carry the investment into people that we love, and we got to take care of people that are relying on us and that kind of stuff. But God invites us to say, hey, at some point, would you be willing to just put that stuff down? Stop doing, stop building, stop creating, and just go ahead and rest in me. I'm telling you, does the Sabbath need to make sense in order to make it into your schedule? Does your life need to be one where Sabbath is easy for you to do in order for it to be right for you to do? Does it maybe work better if we can decide that we're going to obey God even when we really most struggle to trust that He knows what He's talking about? I think this morning what I really believe needs to happen is that we recognize that this is a process that we're being invited into. So worship team, you can come up here, because I really wanted to be intentional about how we end today. Yes, we have a normal way of doing things and all that, but I think the problem is with Sabbath is that some of us, we're carrying and picking up so many things that even right now, as this is happening, you're thinking, okay, I know what happens. We sing a song, and then we go, and now, are we going to eat out, or am I going to go home and cook? I don't really have food at home. I'm going to go grocery shopping. Oh, yeah, I got to put that on the list of things to do today. Actually, it's a pretty good day for grocery shopping. Actually, I don't hate grocery shopping. That's kind of restful, even though it's a chore, isn't it? And so then you're thinking about that, and you're thinking of, like, we're thinking about all the things that we have to do, and life gets busy and all that. And again, I tried to keep today so simple. I know we covered a lot, but we didn't cover a lot, right? Saul, in a story unrelated to Sabbath, shows us it is very easy in the human heart to go, I'm going to do what makes sense to me. Even if the command's clear. The command in Exodus 20 was clear. Do a Sabbath. And any of the other 10 commandments, if I told you I wasn't doing, you'd be like, oh my gosh, and he's a pastor. If I tell you he's a pastor because lives are in the balance, I'm not Sabbathing, you'd be like, well, that definitely makes sense because I don't do it either. And we're incriminating ourselves. The message is clear. God says, I want this for you. We're going to get into it. God himself did it. And that's a whole other thing. But like, at the very end of the day, it is not something that I think you leave and you do perfectly. And that's one of the reasons why we struggle with it. Because like, I don't even know where to begin. You begin here, now. And we're going to create a space for you just to do business with God. Because here's the reality. I've got a neighborhood kid, lives right next to us, and he got a new basketball hoop a number of weeks ago. And he's just always out there now, always shooting hoops. And I know you'd look at me and you'd think, man, this guy could probably teach that kid a lot of basketball, because I clearly played back in the day. I get that a lot, but no, actually I didn't play basketball a lot. So mostly with him and I, it's just kind of fun and kind of bantering back and forth. But I love how he goes out there and he misses a lot of the shots he takes. Just misses most of them. And then, you know what he doesn't do? Is miss a shot and then go, well, I guess I'm just not good at basketball. Take his ball, go back in and play Call of Duty. No, he gets his basketball from wherever it bounced off and went to. He goes back and so sometimes if I'm there, I'm the one throwing it back to him. I'm like, all right, try it again. And then if he does it once, guess what I try and get him to do? Do that same shot again. And how often do you think he gets it? Not very often. Because he's learning. He's practicing. And it's interesting that like what they talk about with Sabbath is that we practice the Sabbath. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as practicing the Sabbath. And I think part of the reason it's good we call it that is because it's probably something we're continually learning to discover new depths to and new ways to really be obedient to it. So you and I, we're looking to practice. We're looking to learn from the guy who lived the most restful life, who died on the cross, not only to save us from our sins, but to save us from the rat race and the craziness of life that everyone else is living, where the one word that we're using to describe ourselves is not fruitful or fulfilled or really joyful or peaceful or any of the things that Jesus came to give us. Instead, some of his followers are using the word busy as the one word we can constantly use to describe ourselves. There's better. There's better. but it only comes from Jesus. So let's just spend a few moments and just invite him to go ahead and take this word now to another level and process it in a way that goes, okay, where in my life is God speaking to me about my trust in him and my ability to let this part of my life go and let him lead me in it?